I had my friends at Amazon send me the movie Big George. And I've said this to you before, and I'm going to put this out here before I bring George Foreman on. You see this? I'm sitting ringside. And George Foreman, who's been on this program before, he goes, Dan, did you think I was trying to win the first, second, or third round? I said, yeah. He goes, I win the fight. That's what I do. And here's my signature, and I'm sitting ringside. And Lampley's one of my dear friends. And Lampley looks over at me, goes, man, I go, I don't know, man. That last round before the 10th, George had started putting pressure. You know what he was doing too? He was waving the guy. And years later, I found out George was moving him in the middle here so that he could get a clean shot on his ass. Let's bring the two-time heavyweight champion of the world on, the legendary George Foreman. George, am I right? You just kept moving him over, right?
Lead with the right and throw the hook. And all of a sudden, he stays away from the hook, and it's right in the area where the right hand will be thrown. And you can say it all you want, and I can say it 100 times, but, man, you have to look up to heaven and say, thank God.
George, as I said, I watched Big George, and I'm halfway through it now, and I'm taken by the journey that you were on. And did they depict your journey the way you wanted to see it and how you wanted it to be portrayed?
You sit down with any artist and you tell them to do a rendition or to paint you, they do it, but it's not like they'll feel like your life was. And they did a pretty good job. They painted a good picture with movies, and I enjoyed it. I go back and watch it over and over, and I still enjoy it. Some things missing out, but I wish they had been missing out of my life as well.
Yeah. George, I'll tell you the one fight that I go back and watch with you is the Ron Lyle fight. To me, man, I watched that fight. I had never seen you, because I remember as a kid, I had never seen you go down like that. And then all of a sudden you got up, and it had to have been one of the most brutal fights in history. Was that your toughest fight you ever had?
Toughest fight I ever had. Never thought I'd get into such. I ever had was truly fight. I had to fight that night and getting.
Hopefully we can connect here again with Big George. Let's see if we can reconnect here a little bit and get George up here going. Here we go. George, you're back with us. That Ron Lyle fight again. Let me ask you this, George. Let me ask you this.
I'm listening.
Do you like old George or new? Did you like old George, younger George, or the comeback George better?
Well, like I had to come back with some strategy the last time around. I knew how to box. I knew exactly what I could do and what I knew what I couldn't do. So I'm more appreciative of the second time around because I took on boxing as a profession. And first time around, man, I was just like throwing bowling balls. That's all that mattered. Throw another ball. You miss, throw another.
George, I'll say this to you. The first George, you looked like Liston and acted like Liston. The second time you came back, you were the grill George Foreman. What was the transformation? Was it you being a priest that put that into you, that you didn't have to be that guy? Because you were already a tremendous fighter, but did it change you as a human? And maybe that was the best thing on the planet, you becoming a preacher, because maybe it centered you more, George. I don't know.
Yeah, become a preacher. Your whole life is about telling people to have faith, believe. Don't just lose your temper. Don't go off. And even working with kids, take it easy. This is not a bad world. You don't have to get even with everyone. I'm teaching all these sermons. Then you go back into boxing and you have to use them. It was a better time for me the second time, a human being. The first time around, I was just some slugger. But sorry about it. Keep losing you like that.
That's okay, George. That's okay. I'm getting a little bit of it here. How about this, George? What was the most gratifying, beating Frazier or the win over Mora?
Well, with Joe Frazier, I was the happiest I ever happy as a boxer. All of a sudden, it was like when I knocked him out and was proclaimed the heavyweight champion of the world. I felt like Jack Dempsey, Joe Lewis, Jack Johnson. I felt like those people all of a sudden. The second time around, I was a grandfather. It was like, I got to get home and get those children straight. My wife has told me to do this. I got to do that. I had too many things to be responsible for the second time around to even experience too much gratification. I was just a happy grandfather.
You know, George, you had a transformation when you lost the Ali fight. That moment in the locker room, and then the moment in the locker room after beating Mora. I wonder if you thought about the whole journey right there. And like you see the movie now, Big George. I mean, you know, you find God after the Ali fight, you have a near-death experience, and then you have a renaissance in your life. And I just wonder what those emotions were like when you were in the locker room like that.
Well, when I lost to Muhammad Ali, man, I was an angry fella to lose the world championship. Man, I was angry for a long time. And I've got to be #1 contender again, fighting Jimmy Young. And that's in the dressing room where I had an experience where I was dead and alive again in a split second. My whole life had gone before me, and I just didn't realize religion existed. And so when I won the fight with Michael Moore, I remember sitting in the dressing room thinking, boy, I'm so glad I don't have to have that vision of death again. I stayed alive. I didn't want any more experiences. I was determined to be the best human being I could be.
George, you had so many great people in your corner like Archie Moore, Dick Sadler, and Angelo. I mean, how important was it having people like that? Because, you know, personalities like you and Ali, I mean, you go into a fight, you pretty much have your game plan. What did those men, as people helping you keep you centered in the ring there, how important were they in your life?
I had this flash. I'm fighting Muhammad Ali in Africa, and he finally got confident, talking smart to me, standing around me. And I said, now I'm going to knock his head off. And I heard Angelo Dundee scream in Africa, Muhammad, don't play with that sucker. When he said that, Muhammad covered himself up, and he never opened again. I remember thinking, boy, I wish I had that guy in my corner. So the next time I'm fighting for the championship of the world, Michael Moore, guess who's in my corner? Angelo Dundee. I remember he called me a sucker, but I remembered also, I thought, I wish I had him in my corner, and it worked out just fine. Archie Moore, putting those combinations together, he insists on it every time around. Get those combinations, George. And the problem was I hit so hard with one punch that I couldn't come back with the other. Because the guys would usually be knocked down or staggering around the ring. But Archie Moore meant so much to me. Talk about a man with wisdom, as far as the boxing ring is concerned, more than you could ever imagine. And Angelo Dundee, a fox, a true fox.
You know, George, for you, you turned out to be one of the biggest pitch men. I mean, Arnold Palmer, you. Did you enjoy that part? I saw you with a Doritos bag. I saw you with Midas. I saw you with, and of course, the legendary grill and all that. Hulk Hogan told me, he goes, I chose wrong. And I'm going like, how in the world? I mean, that really brought your personality out more, didn't it, when you became that guy?
Yeah, no, I tell everybody that I have a photograph of Hulk Hogan and I in the ring. We're practicing in my latter years. And I said, the winner gets
the winner got the grill. I believe the winner, if I'm not mistaken, I think the winner ended up getting.
Yeah, the
I,
winner
I, I
gets
think
the
the winner,
grill.
the winner, right, George? The winner got the grill, right? I think the winner. I think the winner did here. I think we're going in and out. We're losing George here. Hopefully, we can get a couple more last questions with the legendary two-time heavyweight champion of the world, George. Let me close this up by saying this to you. Did you ever regret not having a chance to fight Muhammad again?
Ah, man, that was a tough guy. It's not like I would go to bed thinking, I need some more of that in my life. Not at all. This guy was a tough guy. I was beating him really good and thought I had him, and I burned myself out beating on him. I'm happy that the experience happened. More happy that I got a chance to become friends with him, and that's all that mattered. I never think about that rematch with him now. Think about our friendship. That's it.
You know, George, I'll close with this here to you. I always thought that he acted like a maniac with two men in his life, and the only three men really, Frazier, Liston, and you. And he had to somehow convince himself, not because he wasn't one of the most gifted fighters in the history of the sport, he was, but when you fight intimidating people like you and Frazier and Liston, don't you have to have a sense that you have to convince yourself to get into the ring with someone like yourself as well?
Oh, no doubt about this. This guy believed in himself. Even I hit him a few times. I could see in him thinking, I didn't die. He looked at me with the look like I didn't die. And so because he hadn't died, he figured I might as well fight.
Absolutely. George, it's been an honor. And again, it was an honor to sit in that front thing. And I'll never forget Michael Moore. And I go, this thing's rigged. And then I saw this. Turn to the left, blood coming out. I went, holy shit, he just knocked him out.
Boy, what a punch. What a punch. Whoa.
Man, hey. Boom, boom. There he went, man. Down he went. Was one of the greatest moments. George, I played NFL football, and I've never been in an event where I saw the MGM blow up like that, and it exploded. There was more noise in that place than anything I had ever heard before when you had won that championship, and it was really a great moment. George, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you, and all the best.
You bet. The legendary two-time heavyweight champion of the world, George Foreman. Don't forget Big George. Make sure you go and watch it. Man, you talk about, hey, yeah, let me ask you this. Who is a better knockout puncher, Tyson or Foreman? If I'm not mistaken, I think George has 68 knockouts. And he knocked out Frazier twice, Norton. Who's a better knockout guy, Tyson or him? Both. You know, what are you running for mayor for Philly? Okay. Tyson's a better knockout guy than George Foreman. Tyson was overrated. He played bad competition. Really, who was the biggest fighter he fought? Who was the biggest guy? Michael Spinks? Michael Spinks? Dude, I'll tell you what, this guy Fury, he could throw some, he throws some hands. Hey, how about this? Foreman beat bigger opponents, right? Evander might be the biggest, or Lennox Lewis for Tyson. Yeah. And Tyson lost all them to them. Dude, Evander Holyfield was one of the most underrated fighters in the history of the sport, Tone. He was light heavyweight champ, cruiserweight, and heavyweight. I mean, think about that. He was a 3-weight division champion. Okay? Light heavy, cruiser, and heavyweight. Very few guys can say that in boxing history, that you were all three of those at one time. I believe he was a bronze medalist. George was a gold medalist. Don't forget, too, George was in the 68 Olympics. And after Tommy Smith and John Carlos put their hands up on the podium, George was the guy that had the American flag after he won the gold medal beating the Russian. He was the one in the ring when he went around after he had knocked the Russian. Talk about Bob Beamon in that 68 games also. That's where he went 29-something, 29-7 for the long jump. In my opinion, the greatest Olympics of all time, the 68 Summer Games. Tyson was an alternate. I think he was. And then he went back and beat, I think his name was Tillman. Was it? I think Tillman won the gold, if I'm not mistaken. And then Tyson fought him later, and I think he knocked him out. Ali was a marathon. Hey, Forrest, Muhammad was the greatest heavyweight of all time and maybe the greatest fighter of all time. Showmanship-wise, combination, 81-inch reach, power, strategy, everything. It possessed everything. In the golden age of the heavyweight division, when you're fighting Foreman, Frazier, Norton, Liston, and you're fighting all them guys, Ernie Shavers, Ron Lyle. I mean, you're talking about some of the greatest heavyweights that ever lived in the division. See, back then, being the heavyweight champion of the world, the greatest athletes in sports went into that. Now they don't. There's no great athletes any longer in boxing. That's why you don't see boxing like you did back in the day. Boxing was revered. Boxing's not as revered by the American sports athlete any longer coming up. He doesn't. Being a heavyweight champion of the world is not as big as it used to be. Okay? All right. Do me a favor. Take a timeout. Hit the like button. I want to thank George Foreman once again for coming aboard. Sorry about it being a little spotty, but it's never bad getting George Foreman on the air. Hit the like button. Keep it here on the National Football Show.